It was a crisp Saturday morning when Emma stood outside the tall brick building, her fingers nervously tapping against her phone. She took a deep breath and adjusted the strap of her leather handbag. The day had come her first apartment. For years, she had dreamt of this moment, of walking into a space that would be entirely her own. No more living under her parents' roof. No more shared dorm rooms. No more squeezing her personality into someone else's space. This was it. Emma had spent months saving for a down payment, scouring rental websites, and going to countless viewings. There had been the charming studio with the leaky roof, the two-bedroom that had turned out to be a basement, and the one with a spectacular view, except it was of a construction site. But this one seemed perfect. The building stood at the corner of a quiet street, lined with old oak trees whose leaves had just begun to turn the colors of autumn. It wasn't the fanciest place, but it had a certain charm. The bricks were a little worn, the windows large but framed with age. Emma loved it. It felt lived in, and she could already imagine herself making it a home. She glanced at her phone again, checking the time. The property manager, Mr. Carson, was supposed to meet her in 5 minutes to hand over the keys and give her the final tour. This was going to be her last chance to ask questions before signing the lease and officially moving in. The minutes dragged on, each one filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Emma started to wonder if she had made the right decision. She had spent weeks talking to her friends, her parents, and even her co-workers about finding her own place. Everyone had their opinions, some encouraging, some cautioning her to wait, to save more, to find somewhere better. But Emma knew she was ready. She needed this. Independence, she had told herself over and over again, was her next step. Just as she was starting to pace, Mr. Carson appeared around the corner. He was an older man, in his late 50s or so, with silver hair and a pair of glasses that seemed permanently perched on the edge of his nose. He waved at Emma, his usual friendly smile in place. "Morning, Emma," he called as he approached, keys jingling in his hand. "Are you ready for the grand tour?" Emma smiled back, her heart racing. "Absolutely." Mr. Carson led her to the entrance, pushing open the door to reveal a narrow hallway with tiled floors that had seen better days. There was a slight musty smell, but it wasn't overwhelming. Just the smell of an old building. Emma thought. She wasn't bothered. "The apartment is on the 3rd floor," Mr. Carson said as they made their way to the elevator. "It's a bit small, but for a first place, I think you'll find it quite comfortable." The elevator creaked as it ascended, and Emma tried to ignore the slight twinge of fear that the rickety machine might break down at any moment. When the doors finally opened, they stepped out into a bright hallway, with sunlight streaming through the windows at the end of the corridor. Emma could feel her anticipation rising. Mr. Carson stopped in front of a door marked 3B. He pulled out the key, turning to Emma with a grin. "This is it. Home sweet home." He unlocked the door and pushed it open, stepping aside so Emma could enter first. She took a deep breath and walked inside. The apartment was small, but it had everything she needed. The living room and kitchen were combined in an open-plan layout, with a large window on the far wall that filled the space with natural light. To the right was a small hallway that led to a bedroom and a bathroom. The hardwood floors were a bit scratched, and the walls had a few scuff marks, but nothing a little paint and some TLC couldn't fix. Emma stood in the center of the room, turning slowly to take it all in. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. Mr. Carson walked over to the window, pulling open the curtains to reveal a view of the street below. "You've got a great view of the park over there," he said, gesturing to the trees in the distance. "It's quiet around here, especially in the evenings. You'll have plenty of peace and quiet." Emma nodded, her mind already racing with ideas of how she would arrange her furniture. A cozy sofa by the window, a small dining table near the kitchen, maybe a few plants to bring some life to the space. She could already see herself sitting on the couch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset over the park. "This is perfect," she said softly, more to herself than to Mr. Carson. He smiled. "I thought you'd like it. Now, let me show you the rest." They walked through the apartment, with Mr. Carson pointing out little details: the storage closet by the front door, the updated appliances in the kitchen, the recently renovated bathroom with a new sink and tiles. Emma listened, but her mind was already decorating the space in her head. She imagined hanging pictures on the walls, setting up her bookshelf, and filling the place with the scent of fresh flowers and scented candles. The bedroom was small, just big enough for a double bed and a dresser, but it had a built-in closet, which was a pleasant surprise. Emma ran her fingers along the windowsill, feeling the cool glass beneath her touch. The view from the bedroom wasn't as nice as the living room, just a brick wall from the neighboring building. But that didn't bother her. She'd be spending most of her time in the living room anyway. "So, what do you think?" Mr. Carson asked as they returned to the main room. Emma turned to him, a smile spreading across her face. "I love it. I think this is the one." Mr. Carson grinned. "I'm glad to hear that. I'll go ahead and get the paperwork ready for you. You can take another look around while I do that." He handed her the keys and left the apartment, leaving Emma alone to soak it all in. For a moment, she just stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the building. This was it. This was going to be her home. The thought filled her with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had always lived with other people, whether it was her family or roommates. But now, for the first time, she would be on her own. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. Emma wandered around the apartment, running her fingers along the countertops and imagining how she would decorate each room. She could already picture herself hosting friends for dinner, curling up on the couch with a good book, and waking up in her own space every morning. The possibilities felt endless. She paused by the window, looking out at the park below. A few children were playing on the swings, their laughter echoing up to her apartment. She smiled, feeling a sense of contentment wash over her. This was what she had been working toward for so long. All the long hours at work, the weekends spent saving instead of going out with friends, it was all worth it. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from her mom. "How's the apartment? Did you sign the lease yet?" Emma smiled and typed back quickly. "It's perfect. I'm about to sign now." Her mom responded almost immediately. "So proud of you, sweetie. Can't wait to see it." Emma felt a warm glow in her chest. Her parents had been so supportive throughout the whole process, always encouraging her to take this step. She knew they were proud of her, and that meant the world to her. As she put her phone away, the door opened, and Mr. Carson returned with the paperwork in hand. "All set," he said, handing her the forms and a pen. "Just sign here, and it's officially yours." Emma took the pen, her heart racing as she signed her name at the bottom of the lease. When she finished, Mr. Carson smiled and handed her the keys. "Congratulations, Emma," he said warmly. "Welcome to your new home." Emma smiled, clutching the keys in her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Carson. I really appreciate all your help." He nodded. "If you ever need anything, just give me a call. I'll be around." With that, he left, leaving Emma alone in her apartment once more. She stood there for a moment, staring down at the keys in her hand. This was it. This was real. She walked over to the window again, looking out at the park. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm golden light over the trees. Emma felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had done it. She had found her own place, and now a new chapter of her life was beginning. As she stood there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she thought about everything that had led her to this moment, the years of hard work, the ups and downs, the moments of doubt and uncertainty. But now, standing in her own apartment, she knew it had all been worth it. This was her space, her sanctuary, her home, and she couldn't wait to make it her own. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of packing, organizing, and moving. Emma had enlisted the help of a few friends, who showed up with boxes, tape, and plenty of advice about how to maximize her small space. They spent an entire Saturday hauling her belongings up to the third floor, and by the end of the day, Emma's new apartment was filled with boxes, bags, and furniture in various stages of assembly. Her friends were a huge help, making the process more fun and less overwhelming. They laughed, ordered pizza, and turned unpacking into a game of where does this go? As the night fell and her friends said their goodbyes, Emma found herself standing in the middle of her apartment once again. Only this time, it was filled with the familiar comforts of her life. Her books neatly arranged on the shelf, her favorite blanket draped over the arm of the couch, and her kitchen stocked with groceries for the first time. The apartment, though still in need of some organization, already felt more like home. She had her framed photos on the wall, her scented candles on the coffee table, and her cozy bed made up with fresh sheets. Exhausted from the day's work, Emma decided to treat herself to a quiet night in. She poured herself a glass of wine and collapsed onto the couch, feeling a sense of satisfaction and relief. She had done it. Her dream of having her own place had finally come true. As she sat there, sipping her wine and basking in the soft glow of the table lamp, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had been so worried about whether she was ready for this, about whether she could afford it, whether she could handle living on her own. But now, sitting in the apartment she had carefully chosen, surrounded by the things that brought her comfort, she knew she had made the right choice. Sure, there would be challenges. There always were. There would be days when she would feel lonely, nights when she would question her decision, moments when the responsibilities of living alone would weigh heavily on her. But there would also be moments of pure freedom and joy like tonight, when she could sit in the quiet of her own space, with no one to answer to but herself. Emma finished her wine and got up to wash the glass. As she stood at the sink, looking out the kitchen window at the twinkling city lights in the distance, she couldn't help but smile. She was proud of herself. This was the beginning of something new, something exciting. The next few days were spent organizing and decorating her apartment. Emma took her time, carefully placing each piece of furniture and hanging every picture just right. She wanted the space to reflect who she was, a blend of warmth, creativity, and comfort. She added a few plants by the window, their green leaves bringing life to the room. A colorful rug brightened up the living area, and a collection of pillows made the couch feel like the perfect place to relax. One morning, as she was arranging books on her shelf, Emma received a text from her best friend, Sarah. "How's the new place coming along? Can I come over this weekend for a tour?" Emma smiled and quickly replied, "It's looking great. I'd love to show you. Come over on Saturday." They made plans, and Emma spent the rest of the week putting the finishing touches on her apartment. She wanted everything to be perfect for Sarah's visit. After all, this was her chance to show off the space she had worked so hard to create. Saturday arrived, and Emma busied herself with tidying up the apartment. She lit a few candles, set out some snacks, and even baked a batch of cookies, filling the apartment with the comforting smell of vanilla and chocolate. She was nervous, but excited to show her new place to someone who had been with her through every step of the process. Sarah arrived right on time, her eyes wide with excitement as Emma opened the door. "Wow," Sarah exclaimed as she stepped inside. "This is amazing, Em. It's so cozy, and you." Emma beamed with pride. "Thanks. I've been working on it all week. Let me give you the tour." She led Sarah through the apartment, pointing out the little details she had added to make the space her own. Sarah was full of compliments, admiring the way Emma had made the small apartment feel open and inviting. They spent the afternoon catching up on life, sitting on the couch with mugs of tea and enjoying the warmth of the apartment. As the evening drew near, Sarah turned to Emma with a smile. "I'm so happy for you, Emma. This place is perfect. You've worked so hard for this, and it shows." Emma felt a lump in her throat. "Thanks, Sarah. I've dreamed about this for so long, and now that it's finally real, it feels kind of surreal, you know?" Sarah nodded. "You deserve it, though. You've been working nonstop to make this happen. And look at it, it's beautiful." Emma smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. She was lucky to have such supportive friends, people who had been there through every stage of her journey. She knew that this new chapter of her life wouldn't always be easy, but with friends like Sarah by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came her way. That night, after Sarah left, Emma sat by the window, looking out at the quiet street below. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and the soft hum of traffic was the only sound that filled the air. She felt a sense of peace settle over her, a deep contentment that she hadn't felt in a long time. This apartment wasn't just a place to live, it was a symbol of her independence, her hard work, and her growth. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that she was ready to embrace with open arms. As she sat there, watching the world outside her window, Emma made a promise to herself. She would fill this apartment with memories, with laughter, with love, with moments of joy and quiet reflection. This was her space, her sanctuary, and she was going to make the most of every moment she spent in it. With a smile on her face, Emma stood up and headed to bed. Tomorrow was a new day, and she had a whole new life to live, one filled with possibilities, adventures, and the simple pleasure of having a place to call her own. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had taken the leap, and it had paid off. Her first apartment was everything she had hoped it would be, and so much more.